Well, Professor Esolen, thank you so very much for being here.
Well, thank you, Derek. It's great to be here.
It's great to be able to speak with you for a little while. My first question for you is this. What do you consider to be culturally some of the most pressing or significant issues that are facing Christians today?
What the fundamental issue is, as far as culture is concerned, the Christians need to get it into their minds. It's very difficult to grasp that there isn't really a culture there at all. Okay? There's the residue of a Christian culture, and then there are a whole lot of sub-pagan habits. Okay? There is no real feast that everybody celebrates. The mockery of a feast that you might think of would be the Super Bowl, and I love football, or the strange secular free-for-all that is New Year's Eve in Times Square, New York. That's the best that world has to offer. That's nothing. That's a drink with a hangover afterwards. So Christians, I think, have been buffaloed. They think, oh, well, somehow we've got to maneuver ourselves so as to address this great big thing, this culture. There isn't any culture, okay? It's in ruins. And the people who have reduced it to rubble have nothing to offer. The secular liberalism, and I sort of use that word for want of another, the secularism out there has collapsed. Greater writers than I will ever be noticed it 70 years ago. I've been writing about it since even before the Second World War. Okay? Now, why would we want as Christians to bind ourselves to a corpse? It's a corpse. Okay? Son of man, shall these bones live? Well, not by their own power they're going to live. We are in the unusual situation here of not having to bring Christ to a coherent and vibrant culture. We have to bring Christ to people who have lost the coherence and the vibrancy even of a pagan culture. They've lost it. And in a case like this, to say, well, we got to conform ourselves in this way or that way to the times is complete madness. It's like saying, well, we have to be cancerous in order to preach to people with cancer. Everybody is lame and limping around, so let's amputate our own legs. Let's shoot ourselves in the foot so that we can preach to the lame. That's insane.
So you would say that the biggest issue facing Christians culturally is the fact that there is no culture.
Right. There's a set of habits, mass habits for the mass man, that they go by the name of culture because we don't have another word for it. Sometimes I call it the mass phenomena. Mass education, mass entertainment, mass politics, okay? And now mass information. Mass manipulation by the media of people's psychological makeup. Even the people who are doing the manipulation are also the objects of the manipulation. Yeah, I mean, this is a situation we face. And so we need to remind ourselves first what it even means to have a culture. You know, what it means to renew all things in Christ. That's the answer to that question is, what would it be like to have a Christian culture? Maybe before we even get to that question, we have to ask the prior one, what does it even mean to have a culture?
So within that sort of mass world of mass entertainment and mass politics,
right,
and mass education,
right,
what are the things that are bombarding Christians that they need to be able to address? Or do we try to be culture makers in the first place to try to create a culture that we can then speak into? Or are there sort of mass issues that we need to be aware of and address?
Well, I don't think we need to go out of our way to be aware of the mass issues. They're everywhere. Right? I mean, you don't actually have to watch television to get a pretty fair idea just from what other people are talking about, or just from having to show up at a doctor's office or dentist's office. You're aware of the things out there. You don't have to make a great study of them. So if we are going to bring something different and something new to these people who are so bereft, although they don't know that. We have to get our own houses in order first. Now, this is why I've always thought that, although it hasn't delivered on all of its promises, yet it has delivered on at least to a great extent. Homeschooling represents, for instance, a great hope. If only on the negative side, that is, you have maybe 2 million children for a large part of their young lives removed from the poison chamber. Okay. Now, if people come at you and say, well, so you reject what's going on in the public schools, but what's your great scholastic and educational answer? Well, I can give them some educational recommendations, okay? But the first thing that I always say is, listen, if somebody's been eating arsenic every night for supper, along with the mashed potatoes and the roast beef, the first order of business is not to come up with a complete diet. The first order of business is to stop eating the arsenic, okay? The first order of business is to get rid of that poison, at least out of your system or your children's systems. Get them out of the brothels. What are you waiting for, after all? Then we can talk about specifically what kind of Christian education we can impart to the young people. The first order of business is to get them out of the poison chamber, right?
So what would you define as the arsenic that people are eating, or the poison chamber in which they're living? Is it the absence of culture, or how would you define?
You cannot have a culture based upon the, I'm going to use the word, unfortunately, I'm going to use the word liberal, but the liberal supposition, okay, that the only bearer of rights is an individual, that the individual will determines within certain loose boundaries for convenience sake what is good and what is bad. That the best thing for human being is to be liberated from most moral rules and traditions especially, and the bonds of family and parish and guild and community and so forth, to be untrammeled, right? No culture can be based on that. This is like reversing what John Donne said when in his Meditations upon Death. He says, no man is an island. This is to say that every man has to be an island. Okay? And you don't have a culture made of this vast archipelago of autonomous individuals pursuing their individual dreams. That gets human beings wrong, because human beings are made to be community builders, to be for one another in love. They're made in the image of the three-person God, not in the image, Chesterton says, of the lonely God of Omar, the monotheistic God of sheer will. This is a God of relationship and love, right? So I mean, no culture can be based on that. That may be the fundamental poison. It's not the nastiest poison, but it may be the foundational poison, okay? That your life has meaning based upon what you determine for it, okay? And that the best kind of life is the life that you want to lead because it's your way, and you have a dream. You're going to be, I don't know what your dream is. You're going to be a dental hygienist and scrape plaque off the teeth of strangers, and then you're going to be fulfilled because you're going to make a decent amount of money and go to Cancun once a year, right? Working off the plaque that you've scraped from strangers' teeth. That fundamental poison is everywhere. Okay, it shows up in different forms, right? Who are you to tell me what to do? Who are you to say that I may not do this or I should do that? And that's everywhere. We got to fight it. We got to fight it at every step because it shows up in different forms. Okay. You have to be true to yourself. Shakespeare has one of his stupidest characters in all the corpus of his plays say, "To thine own self be true." Okay, that a guy who is a spy and who suggests to his own son a certain amount of Machiavellian double dealing in a whole play filled with people who are lying to themselves and others, says, "This above all to thine own self be true," and then it follows as the night to the day, that canst not then be false to any man. It's nonsense. But everybody believes that nonsense. Everybody. Nice kids believe the nonsense. What are you going to do? Oh, I have a dream, and I'm going to do this. We got to fight that at its most fundamental level.
That's fascinating, especially because that's the line that I see quoted all the time. And people think they're being very cultural.
No, he's an idiot.
Very culturally
He's an idiot.
Wise, right?
I mean, this is the guy who says brevity is the soul of wit, and it takes him about 70 words to blurt out what he wants to the queen and the king, and they got to kind of tell him, okay, old man, come on. Now, what is it that you have in mind? He's an old fool.
So when some people are confronted with the idea of homeschooling,
right.
Some people will respond by saying, well, you can't just remove your kids from culture, from society. Or some people will say, well, that's not appropriate because we need our kids to be salt and light in the world. And so I'm wondering if you can respond to that.
I'd like them to show me a single instance in the New Testament of somebody sending a child forth into battle or into a brothel to preach to the harlots. These are little children. And instead, Jesus is very severe. Whoever should offend one of these little ones, it would be better for him that a millstone should be hung about his neck and he be thrown into the sea. Come on. These are small children. They are going to be subject to hours and hours and hours and hours of frankly dehumanizing and de-Christianizing influences. And you think that a couple of Bible verses and an hour on Sunday, or even 3 hours on Sunday, is going to counteract that. Maybe you think that you have one of the great rarities in the history of Christendom, a child saint. Well, those are very rare, okay? And I guarantee you that your children, without even being aware of it, okay, will be ingesting, imbibing a great deal of poison along with their lessons. And by the way, it's not as if the schools out there actually do a decent job teaching the very humble but necessary things that we hire the teachers to teach. They don't teach them grammar. They don't teach them geography. Those have been abandoned. They're not going to learn anything real about American history except some politically correct nostrums. When it would be one thing, okay, if the schools were actually competent but poisonous. They're incompetent and poisonous, right? I mean, if your kid is going to get a horrible education, you might as well get a horrible education at home. If you're going to be incompetent at it, at least you won't be subjected to the poison. But it won't be incompetent at home because you could surround your kid with good books that are cheaper now than they've ever been in the history of the world. So that's all nonsense. That's nonsense, okay? You don't send your kid into a porn shop to be salt and light. Sorry. I had to put it that bluntly here. And it's because parents want to relieve themselves of responsibilities. Oh, yes, my child is going to witness. No, that's not going to happen. You're going to end up with a semi-pagan or a pagan or a sub-pagan by the time the kid is 18 years old.
One of the things that you talked about was you likened the contemporary lack of culture,
right,
which is the milieu in which we're situated, as the eating of arsenic with dinner. And one of the things I'm wondering is, how can Christian leaders in particular equip those who are following after them? I'm thinking particularly Christian pastors and maybe Christian school educators.
Yeah.
How and what should they do to equip those who are learning from them or being taught or pastored by them to function faithfully in the world? So
to recognize the poison, to avoid the poison. Let's suppose you put me in mind of the student of mine and his friend who's a genius, who are doing something called the Riverside School for Boys, Riverside Center for Boys down in Southern Illinois. They understand that boys are getting a shabby deal in the schools right now. What they're trying to do is, instead of attacking the shabbiness, which is something that other people have to do, trying to give boys after school a taste of what's good and true and beautiful and healthy and boyish. And if you can acquire a taste for those things, you acquire a taste for real food. You don't want to eat cardboard laced with arsenic anymore. I've seen this happen with my students. If you acquire a taste, for instance, for the classic movies, and some of them were really fine, and they're made with a Christian ethos or made, in fact, by devout Christians. Some of them were devout Christians who were kind of crusty around the edges, like John Ford, but he was a devout Catholic. Alfred Hitchcock was a devout Catholic. Frank Capra, another devout Catholic, and George Stevens and Howard Hawks. I mean, these people were Christians. So if you acquire a taste for those movies, I mean, if you're really introduced to those movies, you find yourself unable to watch Titanic. I mean, Titanic is a colossally bad movie. It's stupid, it's overblown, it's hokey, it's filled with all the contemporary, cliches about sex, and it's just a horrible movie. And the actors can't really act. But you would only know that if you had watched A Night to Remember, for instance, the phenomenal and gripping and chilling Titanic movie from the 50s. And other such things, right? So if you've been reading Jane Austen and Robert Browning and Alfred Tennyson and Wordsworth and people, even our contemporary authors or 20th century authors who were steeped in the tradition, if you read Sigrid Undset, Flannery O'Connor, it's almost impossible for you then to read the trash that's written now. It's like having been introduced to Italian cuisine and then being asked to eat white bread with Velveeta cheese on it. Right. So a lot of the work is done by removing your kid from what's destructive or nasty or stupid. And a lot of it is actually not that hard. I mean, in some ways, our job is easier than we think because beauty is immediately attractive. And before you even think about ideology, which you should never do, but before you even think about it, you've got a beautiful painting in front of you, okay? You get used to that, and the other stuff doesn't satisfy anymore. I mean, I'll give you an example, okay? Once you are really steeped in the tradition of Christian hymnody, okay, and you have sung real hymns that are, I think, best described as biblical or theological poems for congregational singing, and you've sung hundreds and hundreds of these, right? You've sung them out of the greatest English hymnal ever produced, the hymnal 1940 of the Episcopal Church. Phenomenal hymn. Then you go to the silly twaddle that is sung in most Catholic churches today, right? Tuneless, bad poetry, usually bad theology, heretical theology, narcissism, neo-pagan narcissism. So why am I singing this trash? Why am I looking at a painting of Elvis on black velvet? I was looking at Rembrandt before, and now I have a velvet Elvis, okay? I don't want to look at the painting of the Matador or Elvis on black velvet. I want to look at the Caravaggio over there. Why are you giving me something that makes Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star look like Puccini? I've been listening to Bach, I've been listening to Handel, I've been listening to the great spiritual revival songs of the 19th century. I've been singing I Need Thee Every Hour, okay? Or Abide With Me. And now you expect me to sing this garbage? In some ways, we got all the advantage because there's nothing there, right? And something beats nothing every time. But you have to be introduced to something for it to beat nothing. Church art, for instance, is an example of this, right? You go from art, even 20th century, early 20th century church art and 19th century church art, which is steeped in centuries of tradition. And they could be very innovative too, okay? I've seen really innovative early 20th century sacred art that is just spectacular, okay? And they threw it all away to give us what? Paint by numbers pictures of Jesus and Lassie. Jesus patting Lassie on the head, executed in a paint by numbers design by a 5th grader. We gave up that for this, but once people are reintroduced to their heritage, they say, oh my gosh, come on, I'm not taking that seriously. You expect me to take this poet of political doggerel seriously? I've read Tennyson and Browning. Don't talk to me about this. This is silly. It's like I've listened to Puccini, okay? Don't tell me about Miley Cyrus or whatever. Is that a girl or a boy? I didn't even know. It's a girl, isn't it?
Yes, yeah.
I've listened to Puccini's Turandot. You trying to impress me with this? This is not impressive.
So let me ask you this. I'm a minister.
Right.
So what are practical ways or practical steps that I could take to try to develop a love for that which is good and that which is beautiful in the congregation that I serve?
People in our world are particularly starved for beauty, right? Consider what things were like, let's say, if you were a medieval villager, okay? Life was very difficult. You had to work hard, although you probably had about 100 feasts during the year in which you did not work. During the high time in the Middle Ages, when there was global warming and the harvests were really good for about 300 years, because the temperature of Europe was warmer than it is now. And grapes grew in Newfoundland, and they were growing grain on the coastlands of Greenland. But I think, even though in material terms we would consider that the life was hard, they were surrounded by things of beauty. They surrounded themselves with glorious things. All of their festivals were full of bright color. We think of the Gothic cathedrals as kind of dark. They weren't dark. The Industrial Revolution turned them dark. The statues on the Gothic cathedrals were painted. They were painted bright and bold colors. Everything in the Middle Ages was colored brightly. If you were a sculptor, a painter, or somebody who worked with your hands in decorating things, right? I mean, think, you had to join a guild when you were a teenage boy, taken on as an apprentice, and then you become a journeyman, and finally you get adopted into the guild as a full member when you have produced the piece of work that would entitle you to be called a master. That is to say, a masterpiece, right? Thousands and thousands and thousands of people across Europe are producing masterpieces just to belong to a workman's guild, a craftsman's guild. They have beauty everywhere and song everywhere. What do we have? I mean, to look at our public buildings, look at our public roads. I mean, we have what's drab and crass and garish and ugly everywhere. So one of the first things to do, and in some places it may be very difficult because people dig their heels in, is to get back control of the music and reintroduce everybody to the great poems. And I don't mean just medieval plainsong. I'm the whole big tradition that was short-circuited about 50 years ago. And it's overpowering. When some people have never heard these hymns in their lives. I meet people all the time, kids who have gone to Mass every Sunday of their lives, And if I mentioned a great hymn like Abide With Me, they've never heard that hymn. I Need Thee Every Hour, they've never heard that hymn. Some of them have never heard Praise God from whom all blessings flow. Never heard. Praise to the Lord, the Almighty, the King of Kings. Never heard it. It's like never having seen a really good painting. You imagine what that's like? So to the extent that's possible, bring beauty back to the service. And maybe the next thing that you could do is to bring it back to the life of the parish, the life of the congregation, by building up a library of good books. Good books have never been cheaper in the history of mankind. For a couple $1,000s, you could have a library that Jefferson would have mortgaged half his estate to get. It's not that expensive. And you surround yourself with good books, and maybe you set up a reading book. Okay, we're going to read Paradise Lost. Can we do that? Can we do that? Everybody did. Why can we not do what Laura Ingalls Wilder did out in South Dakota? It's one of the anecdotes I always remember from those books, which I read to my daughter when she was a kid, and my wife loved. My wife is the one who introduced me to them. When she was 16, her mother gave her a gift and hid it underneath the clothes in the back of her drawer. It was a book of Tennyson's poems. Imagine that. You got these dirt farmers in South Dakota, and the mother knows what Laura would want, and she buys her a collection of Tennyson's poetry. Tennyson's poetry can be had for $5-6 now. Anybody can have it. Who's reading it? I now commonly meet students who've never heard his name, right? So, the books are there. They're everywhere. They're not that expensive. Maybe a thing to do. This will be easier to do in a Protestant congregation than in a Catholic congregation, I think, because you guys do a lot of things together socially. Well, let one of them be the reading of really good literature, written by Christians. Sometimes it doesn't even have to be literature with a Christian theme. It's a recovery of what's human. I'll tell you another thing. And again, I think this would be easier for you guys to do, because Catholics can be very stubborn.
Protestants can become really stubborn.
Yeah, okay,
as well.
that's possibly true. Maybe grass is greener on the other side of the churchyard.
Sometimes just because it's been covered in manure.
Yeah, right. So I hang around. My wife and I, we visit antique stores a lot, and because I like to go for the weird books, and I buy her presents there, and she goes for furniture and other things. And so one day in a junk shop in Canada, I found, falling apart, okay, because it was heavily used, a little booklet called Community Sing book, published circa 1900. And the head note to the book says that there's nothing that joins a people together in friendship and community like song. And so apparently at this time, people in your little village would get together and sing. Not even the people in the church, it's just people get together. Oh, it's time for community to sing. Oh, everybody comes and sings. And the book of songs was produced in Canada, so it has "O Canada" there, and "The Maple Leaf Forever," and "Rule Britannia," because this was in the time of the Dominion, right? And "God Save the King." "God Save the Queen," actually, because it was Victoria at the time, still. It has folk songs from all over the place. So "Aloha Oi" comes in from Hawaii, and "Loch Lomond" comes in from Scotland, and "Annie Laurie" from Scotland. Love songs, like Annie Laurie. "Juanita" comes in from Spain. Silly songs, like "A capital ship for an ocean trip was the Walloping Window Blind." And the cook was Dutch and behaved as such, for the diet he gave the crew was a couple of tons of hot cross buns served up with sugar and glue. Some of them are silly songs, and then some of them were hymns. Okay, so "Nearer, My God, to Thee" is there. "Swing Low, Sweet Chariot" was there. I mean, there's some high church hymns there, and then some of the spirituals, right? All songs for men only, songs for women, for mixed choirs, for children. They're all there. It's about 120 songs, right? People used to do human things. Well, if Thomas Aquinas is correct when he says that grace perfects nature, there's got to be a substratum of nature to build upon, the quintessentially human. And maybe our parishes should be recovery stations for those things, because not out there is desert. Out there it's full of Walgreens and Muzak, but it's really desert. People don't get together for anything. They don't even know the name of their next door neighbor. I don't know the last name of our next door neighbor in the United States. In Canada, where we go spend the summer on our island, everybody knows everybody. They even know us, even though we're only there 3 months out of the year. When we get there, they say, "Welcome home." So, and again, it's like, it sounds like a difficult thing, and yet it's in other ways as easy as falling off a log, because you're just working with what human beings naturally are. Human beings naturally do want to get together in joy and festivity and mirth and sing. And boys and girls really do naturally want to admire each other. They don't naturally want to hate each other's guts, you know?
I had a friend who told me that he no longer wanted to be an evangelical when he read the words of "Let all mortal flesh keep silence."
Oh my.
Because he realized he could
It's
never
a stunning
sing.
poem.
It is.
Yeah.
He said he realized that he could never sing that song in the church that he served because
What it is to become a higher church Protestant.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
"Let all mortal flesh keep silence, and in fear and trembling stand. Ponder nothing earthly minded, for with blessings in our hand, Christ our God to earth descendeth." With a 5-note run on "descendeth," our true homage to demand. Yeah, right. In the last verse, "At his feet the 6-winged seraph, cherubim with sleepless eye, veil their faces to the presence, as with ceaseless voice they cry, Alleluia, 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 Lord Most High." Oh man, what a poem. And for that, we have to sing, well, I don't know if you have the awful music in your congregation, it's Catholic awful music. We have to sing, "I am the bread of life." Excuse me, but I ain't the bread of life. If you eat my flesh and drink my blood, not only are you going to the hospital, but you're probably going to go to jail. You're not going to live forever.
One final question, and just a quick answer. What are some of the ways that Christian leaders are failing right now in trying to encourage Christians to eat good food? What are some of the ways that Christian leaders are abandoning Christians to?
I think it's two things, right? And look, we've all been compromised. We breathe the same poisonous air. It took me a long time with each successive year over the course of about 15 years or so, I began to realize that I had bought this thing that was wrong, this other thing that was wrong, this other thing that was wrong. I mean, an innocent sounding thing, the idea that you should never make it obvious, even implicitly, that to your students what you believe. I came to see that was wrong. That was the wrong strategy for our time. That I was priding myself on something that was stupid, that I had bought that bill of goods. I hadn't bought other bills of goods, but I had bought that one. So they're insufficiently aware of how compromised we all are. And then, again, we're all insufficiently aware of the great treasures that we've allowed to lie in the attic. So as a Roman Catholic, I sometimes compare the Catholic Church to the dragon, either in The Lord of the Rings or the dragon at the end of the poem Beowulf. What do dragons do? They sleep and snore on hoards of treasure. And they don't do anything with them. Well, in many ways, that's what the church has been. Or the church has a whole priceless treasure. Where is it? It's in the attic. Why is it in the attic? Oh, I don't know. Somebody put it up there a long time ago. I never really thought about it. Well, time to go up the attic and take that stuff down. And this can't be done all at once. It's a slow process. I mean, just to realize how much we've lost, it may be the work of a lifetime. But the work of a lifetime, it'll never get started unless you say, okay, all right, I know I can't do everything all at once, but I can do one thing. Okay, so I don't have the education in the humanities that John Henry Newman had or Charles Spurgeon. Don't have it. Well, I can start someplace. They all read Bunyan. They all read Pilgrim's Progress. I haven't read Pilgrim's Progress. So the second most influential book in the generation of the founders, second to the Bible, is Pilgrim's Progress. Well, maybe I ought to read it, Maybe we ought to read it together. Everybody read Paradise Lost. I haven't read Paradise Lost. It's a poem. It's too tough. You start somewhere. And it almost doesn't matter where to begin. If you got a taste for poetry, start there. You got a taste for painting, start there. Taste for music, start there. Taste for the great old sermons, start there. But start. Everybody can't do everything. Nobody can do everything. But any one person can do something. You just start. So I think they need to pick themselves up and go troop on over to the attic. Does that help a bit?
That helps very much. Thank you so much.